Welcome everyone. We will be talking about the most popular agile methods in terms of project management in this presentation. Yes, the most popular agile method is the fulcrum of discussions in this video. The agenda is very simple. We'll have a background discussion around it. What exactly is the problem statement, the methodology adopted, I will provide you with an overview of Agile project management, the literature survey, the Scrum or SAD. If you want to go around, SAD is Scrum Agile Document Delivery Framework, SADD, as in, and DoD's effort to embrace agile. Now, what is DoD? DoD is definition of done, or should I say definition of delivery, which has been done already, and the conclusions and the recommendation thereof. This will be a small, sweet presentation for you to understand exactly what we are looking forward to. The current economic situation is driving contractor to becoming more lean. For when I say more lean, basically I am attributing to the fact that we are looking to hammer down the cost, more lean operating methods for project development. So we have the best optimum utilizations of the product or the project that comes around it. We are trying to reduce the cost impact, especially true for government contractors working on the Department of Defense. So, one method pursued is to switch from a waterfall model. Waterfall model is everything which is predicted, predetermined, and already stated, to a more agile method, which is much more reciprocative, much more receptive, much more reactive, much more flexible. Is what we are looking into it. I have just given you a definitions if you want to go around the defective and the wasteful requirement in the traditional development process as far as the graphical representation is concerned. Allow me to discuss the problem statement. Let me say about Boeing as a sponsor of a problem. The problem statement was, is agile sufficient for satisfying documentation needs on DoD's mission critical system? Now, DoD's, I have been talking about it, is the definition of done. Definition of done, DoD, or at times it might be deliverables also. What are the deliverables, mission critical and system? So how is documentation impacting the definition of done methodology as far as agile project management is concerned? Now we'll talk about deliverables, reporting on agile ability to meet documentation needs with a framework developed for documentation generations, as in the process why it is been discussed. So we have a problem statement, we have deliverables, and how do we meet across with it is what we are all interested around here. This is the point of discussion. So what is a mission critical system? System criticals of definition of done's ability to meet his responsibilities includes command and control system, the satellite system, the inventory management system, the transportation management system, the medical system, the equipment, the pay, and the personal usage as on, when on, thereby, as the case might be. So yes, we are talking about documents of primary interest, and there might be n numbers of documents. If you go with the figure that comes around it, you will see a lot of technology or initiative transition in progress, which has been reflected in the MITRE 2010 as the case might be. Excuse me. So the milestone review, as we have been talking about it, or MITRE, if you want to go around it, milestone review is of SRR, or the system subsystem specification. SSS, what we are talking about, the documentation of relevance. We are talking about SRS is the software requirement specification. We are talking about IRS is interface requirement specification. Similarly for PDRs and CDRs, as the case might be. Mind you, I'm just giving you an example to elaborate upon agile project management scenario as the case might be. Let me give you a literature research about the methodology. Now, what is the ideas behind the agile method and how? Again, I repeat, how does it impact documentation? How does it include the step-by-step processes thereby? Existing methods for generating documentation in Agile. We can have case studies. I have just recounted about a Boeing. We can interview various companies with regard to the project using Agile. I'll look at the approach to documentation used in each of the projects as the case might be. absolutely impeccable approach that comes out here. What is Agile? A set of software best practices strung into an official set of principles, as in 2001, way back in Agile Manifesto. And what does this manifesto states around it? It states upon the principles of Agile, which is all about individuals and interaction over process and tools. Individuals and interactions are given prime importance rather than over process and tools, as the case might be. Similarly, for working software over a comprehensive documentation. Now, what has been given precedence is the software documentation that comes around it. Why? The reason is software can be manipulated, updated, the documentation becomes very reciprocative, very reflective, as on when on basis. It is data which has been generated and can be accessed simultaneously. Whereas in the comprehensive documentation, the documentation has to be done at a particular period of time, keeping a set of parameters in your mind. So, working software gets a precedence. Similarly, about customer collaborations, definitely yes, in an agile format, customer gives up much more preferences over it, over the contract negotiation. Again, contract negotiation is a time bound negotiation that a customer does with the client, in which the milestone, the scope of the project has been clearly defined. It doesn't have the flexibility that the agile project management would be coming around it. The customer collaboration needs to know as on when on basis. Response to the change over a following a plan as a case scenario. Now, what is response to the change? Is being reflective, is being reciprocative, is being receptive, is being agile, is being flexible as regard to a fixed plan that one approaches all together. That is the differences. So the key aspect of any agile methodology, what are they? They are iterative, step by step process, incremental, a small marginal improvement that comes around it, self organizing, should I say self managing, and emergent. With the passage of time, the changes in the environment, the dynamicity that comes around it, it emerges. You will see, you might have started a project with a set of objectives in mind. By the time you have actually come to the culmination of the project, the set of objectives have completely been reviewed, revised altogether. So yes, iterative is planned modification of parts of system, which assists with the modification of design and requirement. Incremental is developing the parts of system separately and integrate. Assist with improving overall methodology. Then we have got self-organizing. The team has a responsibility of organizing its internal dynamics. And emergence, as I have said, the set of tools, the set of technique, the set of development environment, and the requirement emerges eventually during the processes thereby. Now, there are a lot of misconception. May I say the misnomer that has been much more prevalent in the community of the project managers, the viable managers. Believe me or not, these managers are used to utilizing the traditional methodology, the waterfall approaches, thereby approximately. So agile is a pizza box methods, as in when on basis we come across here. The agile is all on nothing methodology, wherein we pertinently talk about everything in a box which is already ready made altogether. We are talking about the traditional development, which is inferior, much inferior, and agile only affects the developer. Again, this is a software related as and when on basis. We are talking, it need not be a developer oriented, it can be as and when on for every nuances that comes around it. The Scrum Agile. Now, what are we talking about it? Now, this is where we shifting from the software to the traditional board system, wherein the backlogs can be pasted around, as in a memory tapes or the key or the slips that comes around it. The short slips that can be affixed onto the notice board or the board that has been placed around it. It's a key component of Scrum Agile. Now, what is Scrum Agile? It is a cross-functional team, whereas a particular bottlenecks comes around it, a particular attentions, or there is a change in the scope of the project. Now this change in the scope can be notified. Obviously, yes, it has been notified in the software, but it can be displayed variedly onto the project, whereas the product backlog specification scope has been changed altogether. Time box development iterations, as on when on basis we are talking around it. We are also talking about the end of cycle. The end of cycle states the start time and the culmination time very specifically. Now, where did the Scrum originated? I am sure it was somewhere in the Far East, way back in Japan or probably on an advancement. And thereafter, there was an incremental development in the United States of America. What are we talking about? We are talking about OOPS or object oriented technologies in software. As the case might be, there is what comes with the Scrum technology. I have repeatedly I'm telling it to you, there are various softwares. Let's say Trello and Slack being one of them or two of them, if I say it. They are all about scheduling, they are all about operating, they are all about monitoring softwares as to what the processes is all about. It look here, the pictorial depiction of the Scrum Agile, which I have taken from scrumalliance.com. If you look into it, it will tell me about the product backlog. Look here, this is what the product backlog is around it. We do not look into the Scrum meeting which might take place, which might not take place. There might be a sprint, there might be a potential shipment product that comes around it. But where did it all start from? This is the end product. It all starts from here. This is the process that comes around. Absolutely. Process around here, the vision has to be started, then the product look, the backlog, the sprint backlog, the daily meeting, everything culminates once, one for and all. You remove all your things, you remove all your small milestones, you achieve everything to finish the project thereby. So traditional system engineering document generation versus the agile system of engineering. Now, wherein the traditional system, we have the SRS, the RS, the SSS, everything which has been specified. Wherein the design review, we are talking about the preliminary design, we are talking about the critical design. The traditional engineering document, it says about design, develop, probably test, and then deploy. But in an agile system of engineering, it's a lot of effort that comes around it, and people can be giving an input every now and then. You need to manipulate those inputs and incorporate into your projects before you actually hand over to the end customers per se. So DoD's efforts, again, I've been selling it to you. What is DoD? Is a definition of done, or should I say definition of delivery, which has been completely done or finished. So DoD's definition of done's effort for embrace technology is wherein the process is changing from the guidelines to a better agile software development, as been suggested every now and then. Now, principles of agile documentation, which states is not just enough documentation, should satisfy the objectives of the use. For the documentation, do not generate if not planning is to be used to transfer knowledge in teams and between teams altogether. Agile tends to transfer the knowledge within the team. Knowledge transfer is essential for an add-on projects as on when on basis. We need to know this thing, and this is where the agile principles or agile documentation is fair enough. Let me tell you the two documentation methods that comes around it. The method number one is adapted agile, use of definition of done standard as a binding constraint to the agile effort. Documentation must be generated to support periods of customer reviews. Full and complete documentation is expected. Plan a full documentation update as on when on basis with an each appropriate iteration. When I say iteration, please mark date, time, hour as specifically as possible, with the emphasis on the last iteration to generate complete deliverable documents. Ideals for contract already in work with waterfall, style programs, and so on and so forth. This is what we are looking forward. Method number two is aligned agile. Documentation is generated as needed during the agile implementation. Customer understanding to the differences in agile method is essential. Customer must agree to less documentation that is generated only to meet the documentation objective. Yes, absolutely clear. In progress reviews and supporting documentation are also broken to match exactly with the shorter development iteration. Ideals in terms of documentation can be negotiated with the customer. Suggested for a company-wide migrations towards the usage of the agile methods. Absolutely done and there. Now let us come and revisit the key concepts of the framework. Designed to align with the Scrum Agile. Now, what are we looking into it? We start to understand the documentation right at this point. Study those documents. Finalize the contract document that comes around here. Once you have finalized the agreement, establish the definition of done or DOD. Once we have understood the small, minuscule milestone, we develop the product backlog if there are any before we make some changes in the sprint and actually it comes to an end. And this is all we are talking about integrating the seamless part of Scrum Agile. The core concept remains that of definition of down as the case might be. The framework details, there are two framework. I have already stated around it. Examine required documents, finalize the contract agreements. Now, what are the required documents? You need to have the complete analysis of the project documentation requirement by the stakeholders. Finalize contract agreement reflect any changes, any additions, any subtraction, anything that comes in terms of documentation requirement. Develop product backlogs, add relevant tasks associated with the documentation to the product backlog as their we are talking about the sprint, the words in document, as in the process wide, and the end of the cycle review. Evaluate the complete work on documentation against the DOD, or should I say, definition of done. Present current work to the stakeholders for review. If completed, handle accordingly. If not, probably prepare for the next sprint altogether, next round of work that comes around it. Before I wind up, I like to conclude by stating that agile methodology can be used to satisfy documentation needs for a mission critical software development for a department of defense with some modification on its pure form, and you can do it in any of the projects. It need not be defense, it need not be civil, it need not be pharmaceutical. You can have any numbers of modification. Customer interaction, acknowledgement of the differing needs for the documentation using agile is eventually the key things. With this, I come to an end of this presentation. Thank you for watching this video.